Good morning, everyone. You can be seated. All right. Thank you very much. Good stuff. Well, good morning, Crosswalk. My name is Steve Lewis. I am a new crosswalker. I wasn't here last Sunday, but I understand that some of the new gang was introduced, and I'm part of that new gang, so grateful to call this place home, and been around for a little shy of a year. I first showed up last August, but I still don't know most of you. Most of you don't know me. Some of you are saying, who's this guy that's supposedly been here for a year? He's cutting out on church a few times, right? As it turns out, I work a lot of Sundays. I'm a hospital chaplain at Santa Rosa Memorial Hospital, and, thank you. That's kind of my little bit. But I'm really glad to call this place home. One of the reasons is that I've connected with Pete in a way that he and I have shared some similar things, and we've gone down a similar pathway, and so this is a good fit for me, and this is a good place for me to call home, and as somebody that does what I do for a living, I'm glad to come here and be a part of this community that's so active and being the hands and feet of Jesus here in Napa. And it's a real honor for me to be here sharing with you this morning. I'm going to be here this week and next week. Next week we're going to talk about death. So if that's not a good enough selling point, then, I love how Pete set up the new guy, right? Let's talk about anxiety this week and death next week, right? Thank you. Thanks, Pete. Appreciate that. Yeah. Well, like I said, Pete and I share a similar pathway, and I assume that in saying that, you're not turning on me already. I'm the son of a pastor. I grew up in a Southern Baptist pastor's home, so you know I'm really well adjusted. It's best environment ever. But I grew up in that environment, did pretty well, to be honest, and kind of thrived in that, but also kind of experienced some of the downside of living in a very conservative, particular way of approaching theology and the life in Jesus. And about 18, 19 years ago, I started kind of unwinding some of that stuff. And like I said, this place is a good place for me after all of that. I grew up in Southern California, in San Diego. I will say Southern California because this November we're going to vote and split the state up into 3 parts, right? And I officially will have to say I am a Southern California native. But I love Napa. I love living here, and this is a good place. So this week we are talking about anxiety, worry, and physical illness. And this is a continuation of the series that we've been in over the last several weeks from Adam Hamilton's book, Unafraid. And this chapter deals with anxiety. It deals with worry and physical illness. So when I say the word anxiety, it's actually one of those words that actually stimulates the kind of response that the word says, right? If I say that word, if I were to just go out on the streets of Napa and take a poll of all the tourists that are in town for the day and asked, is anxiety a good thing? I'm pretty sure that nearly all of them would say, no, it's not. And I'm sure that most of you would say anxiety is not a good thing. But as is the case in our culture, a lot of the things that we say we believe, we don't actually practice. We invite anxiety into our lives every day. Think about this. Does anybody out here like roller coasters? That's anxiety, right? I remember being in line for Space Mountain as a little kid for the first time. That's anxiety. We bring this into our lives. Horror movies. Anybody like horror films? In the past 20 years or so, $10 billion in box office receipts alone for horror movies. That's anxiety. Any Golden State Warriors fans? Sports is anxiety-inducing, right? The finals this year were a bit of a cakewalk, but anybody here nervous when the Warriors were going up against the Houston Rockets during the conference finals? Was not looking that great. Anxiety, we bring this into our lives voluntarily. What is wrong with us? And yet, anxiety is also something that's hard to deal with. We all get anxious when it comes to tests and deadlines, and sometimes we bring anxiety into our lives for very silly reasons. But sometimes anxiety has a physical component, okay? Our bodies have kind of an early warning system. When you have a headache, it might be a signal that there's a tumor. So you go check it out, maybe. It might just be that you have a headache and you need another cup of coffee. But a rapid heartbeat, it might be a signal that something needs to be checked out. It might be something that just goes away naturally. But our bodies are designed in such a way as to give us these signals and these warning systems. But for some of us, anxiety becomes something really intensely scary. It becomes something that changes the way we approach our world. And I want to be sensitive here because over the last several weeks, we've talked about fear. Primarily. We've talked about Hamilton's different chapters, and for some of us here this morning, the way you experience anxiety is at a whole different level than what we've been talking about. And some of us may have been experiencing this book with some mixed feelings, because what you experience isn't just kind of a garden variety worry over physical violence or the apocalypse coming. The anxiety actually causes you to have fear to even go outside. And even being here this morning might be a tremendous act of courage on your part. Anxiety is something that in the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual of the American Psychiatric Association, it's called the DSM, it actually has a whole category for anxiety disorders. And some of these anxiety disorders actually produce physical symptoms. When I was a chaplain resident, one of my fellow residents ended up in the ER multiple times within our 1-year residency because he thought he was having a heart attack. And really, he was having panic attacks from an anxiety disorder. And I don't want to be dismissive. I don't want us as a community to look at a book called Unafraid. Here are some good tools and tricks to do away with fear in your life. And if you practice these things well enough, and if you believe well enough, and if you have enough faith, then it's all going to be good. For some of you, it may not all be good. And I don't want you to experience this as a shaming kind of a thing. This doesn't mean that you're damaged goods. It doesn't mean that you're irretrievably broken. You are loved by God. You bear the image of God in every fiber of your being. And the fact that you deal with this anxiety, it doesn't make you have less faith. It just means you have a different kind of challenge. God wants good things for you. God wants good things for all of God's children. So I want you to experience grace as we talk about these things. It's something that, you know, it can change people's lives. And if you are experiencing this, there's help out there. There's help here in this community. But it might be something that you want to talk to your doctor about. It might be something that that a short or even long course of medication might help with. But I want to encourage you all to start with where you are. Give grace to yourself. Be gentle with yourself as you walk through these steps, okay? Last week, I wasn't here, but I'm a good crosswalker, and I always listen to the podcast. So, good tool out there, actually. It's a great thing. So I know that Pete talked to you about something that I was planning on talking to you about, and it's a great response to anxiety. It's called gratitude. A gratitude journal. It sounds like a fluffy, kind of shallow Oprah thing, but there's a lot of really good, hearty research on gratitude journaling, and how it affects people's lives. There's a professor out of UC Davis. His name is Robert Emmons. He's written for decades on gratitude, done thorough academic research about the way that anxiety and depression in particular are affected by gratitude. Gratitude as a practice has health benefits, and it actually changes your brain. I wanted to drill down on this a little bit this week, and so I read an academic article out of the Indiana University. And they took a group of people that was set up for psychotherapy for anxiety and depression, and they took two groups that were both entering therapy at the same time. One of the groups they gave a gratitude writing exercise to before they started. And then later, after several rounds of therapy, they studied them using an fMRI, which kind of tracks brain activity. And the group that was given the gratitude exercise had a significantly higher sensitivity to the good things in the world around them. And that effect actually persisted 3 months later when they were retested. So what I'm saying is gratitude, a practice of gratitude, literally changes our brains. It's a pathway to healing. So I'd encourage you to look into that. Write down 5 things each day that you're grateful for. Spend a little time journaling. Pay attention to these things. God wants us to experience good things in this life. And God has given us good things in this life. And sometimes we need to slow ourselves down and just pay attention to some of that. So that's anxiety at a kind of clinical level, at a more serious level. But what about the garden variety worry that we face? We are people that like to worry too. In Hamilton's book, he gives a definition of worry: imagining a negative future that may never and likely will never happen. We go through our lives inventing things to worry about. What am I going to wear today? Do I have the right clothes for the event I'm going to? Am I going to be late? Chuck and Linda in the car in front of me are going way too slow, and I'm going to be late. Come on, Chuck and Linda, get out of the way. We worry about things all the time. But Jesus, in his most famous sermon, the Sermon on the Mount, actually spoke to this. I'm going to read a passage. It's kind of a lengthy passage, so stay with me. It's Matthew 6, and he says, "I tell you not to worry about your life. Don't worry about having something to eat, drink, or wear. Isn't life more than food or clothing? Look at the birds of the sky. They don't plant or harvest. They don't even store grain in barns. Yet your Father in heaven takes care of them. Aren't you worth more than birds? Can worry make you live longer? Why worry about clothes? Look how the wildflowers grow. They don't work hard to make their clothes. But I tell you that Solomon, with all his wealth, wasn't as well clothed as one of them. God gives such beauty to everything that grows in the fields, even though it is here today and thrown into a fire tomorrow. He will surely do even more for you. Why do you have such little faith? Don't worry and ask yourselves, will we have anything to eat? Will we have anything to drink? Will we have any clothes to wear? Only people who don't know God are always worrying about such things. Your Father in heaven knows that you need all these. But more than anything else, put God's work first and do what God wants. Then the other things will be yours as well. Don't worry about tomorrow. It will take care of itself. You have enough to worry about today. We do kind of manufacture this attitude of worry in our lives. One of the things that I did, I don't know if it was intentional or not, but it turns out that I did it, to limit worry in my life is I never had kids. All right? The parents are saying, yeah, wow. Yeah. Can't undo that one, by the way, parents. We started earlier asking and talking around the tables about the most dangerous things that you did as a child. And bonus points if you did those things while your parents weren't watching. Now, parents, I don't want to start something with you right now, but just imagine if your kid was doing that thing that you did right now while you're sitting here. We worry about our kids all the time. Are we going to get them to school in time? Are they in the right kind of school? Are they learning enough? Are they in the right kinds of activities? Are they becoming well-rounded as little people in this world? Even people that don't have kids. We worry about our career path, and we worry about our retirement savings. We worry about things all the time. But often, our worry comes out of a broken pathway of thinking. Back in the late 80s, early 90s, I read a popular business book that is going to be very familiar as soon as I say the title. Anybody know any of the 7 habits of highly effective people? Okay. There's a chapter in there that talks about this stuff. And it talks about one of our problems that I think we have with worry, and that's a mentality of scarcity versus abundance. It's what we call a zero-sum game, where we go about life thinking that there's only this finite, defined pot of whatever we're pursuing in the world. And if other people get to that pot first, there's less of it for us. It could be money. It could be love and acceptance. It could be a career path. But we pursue things as though I got to get mine before somebody else does. And if they win, I lose. And that's a problem, because that's not the way of Jesus. Jesus, in talking about his not worrying and allowing God to provide for us, just like God provides for the birds and the wildflowers, that's a life of abundance. The way of Jesus is a life of abundance. It's not a life of scarcity. We know that ultimately there's plenty of love to go around. There's a lot of acceptance to go around. There's plenty of money to go around. In this country in particular, it's actually kind of hard to go hungry, to literally go hungry. You may not have as much money as you would like, and poverty is real, but we take care of people. You're actually not going to starve. You're actually not going to die of starvation in this country. And I say that having worked with homeless people for a profession, and there are resources out there. So even in a worst case scenario, you'll have what you need when you need it. Pete repeated a phrase last week several times over. It's gonna be okay. Life is hard right now, but it's gonna be okay. You might be scared because you just got a pink slip at work. It's gonna be okay. You might be scared because you're sending your kid off to college this fall. For the first time, they're going to be out of the house. Scary stuff. It's going to be okay. It's going to be okay. There's abundance. There's an abundance of safety. There's an abundance of love. There's an abundance of security. And we need to attend to that. One of the ways that is helpful for us in dealing with worry, dealing with anxiety, is something that we're actually pretty familiar with around here at Crosswalk. How many times have we come into this place, we've carried in the stress of our week, we've carried in the agenda for the rest of the day or the next few days, and Pete has told us, okay, close your eyes and breathe a little bit. Let's do a meditation together. Meditation is a really big tool that we can use. It's a response to worry and anxiety in our lives. And it doesn't require that you be some Zen master sitting on a hill, lotus style, and you don't have to be the perfect meditator. But anybody can practice a few minutes of quiet meditation that helps center us, that help clear the worry out of our minds. Tomorrow's problems are going to be there tomorrow. You could solve all of today's problems. You're going to have new problems tomorrow. But today, if I clear my mind, I'm better able to address the things that are worrying me and weighing me down. Adam Hamilton talks about a simple, easy process for meditation. It's as simple as remembering the number 4. It's called 4-way breathing. And basically it's just sitting in a quiet, comfortable position and breathing in over the course of 4 seconds. You count to 4 as you breathe in. And then you hold the breath to a count of 4. And then you exhale to a count of 4. And then you hold. And you count to 4 before drawing in the next breath. If you practice that for even a few minutes, you'll find that the worry goes away. It doesn't fix everything, but it does help. There's, in our culture today, we hear the term mindfulness meditation quite a lot. And it's a simple, very easy practice. You just sit in a quiet place, comfortable, and you start breathing. And you pay attention to your breathing. You just focus on the breath. Each breath. Feel how the air feels coming into your body and filling your lungs. And then when you exhale, you pay attention to the breath. And if you're like me, the monkey mind is active, and you'll think about other things that will distract you. No judgment, just recognize it, set it aside, return to the breath. That's mindfulness meditation. And it too can change the brain. There's a study at Stanford University right now. It's called compassion cultivation training. It's a training process that they've developed out of a research grant funded by the Dalai Lama. And they've done a lot of brain research in the way that meditation literally changes the way our brains function. The wiring of our brains change as we do these practices. And so I'm telling you that there's healing for our brains, for anxiety, for garden variety worry, for the things that clutter our lives and slow us down and make us ineffective. And as we experience clarity in our thinking, we experience the abundance that Jesus talks about. It's going to be okay. You're going to get what you need each new day. Let's spend a few minutes now talking about physical illness. As a chaplain, I realize that I have a bit of a skewed kind of experience with physical illness because I'm around it all the time. It's a little bit hard. I'm not a doctor, so I don't have the diagnostic knowledge, but it's hard to walk through any given grocery store because I walk down the aisles and I see other people in the grocery store and I notice some of the physical illnesses that they might be experiencing, some of the physical limitations, and it's real. And by the way, I just want to pause. You guys look really good, okay? Yesterday I was at work, and my audience yesterday was not as well dressed as you guys. Green hospital gowns. You guys, some of you actually combed your hair this morning, so I want to thank you for that. I deal with sick people all the time. And yet physical illness is something that we're all going to experience at one point or another. And we all have loved ones that deal with physical illness, injury sometimes. A lot of the people that I work with in our physical rehabilitation unit, they might have a stroke, but they may also have a broken back because they fell out of a tree, and they're 30 years old and previously very healthy. And we all have things to work with, physical challenges. And one of the things that causes us to be a little bit worried about physical illness is nowadays we have a name for every single medical disorder that is around us. I'm not the only one here. When I was a little kid, people used to die of old age all the time. Nowadays, nobody's allowed to die of old age. You die of something because we have a name for it. There are illnesses that we could go into in great detail here. But it makes me think of this dear, sweet old lady. A few years ago, when I was a hospice chaplain, I used to visit this lady in her home, 113 years old. At the time, she was the 7th oldest person in the United States. And then I went to her house one day, and her 85-year-old daughter, who was her primary caregiver, 85, and she said she was excited to say, "Hey, Steve, guess what? Mom's number 6 now." Somebody ahead of her on the list had died, so she'd moved up the rankings a little bit. But even at 113, she wasn't allowed to die of old age. She died of heart failure. If anyone deserves to die of old age, it's 113, right? But no, not even her. So some of these illnesses kind of ramp up our anxiety, especially if you have watched television in the United States in the past few years. You see all the pharmaceutical ads, and you get anxious about the things that could go wrong. But physical illness is real. And physical injury, things that limit our mobility, things that limit our ability to kind of interact with the world in a normal, sort of expected way. It's scary stuff. It really is. It's a condition that changes our life and our lifestyle sometimes. We have to make adjustments to these things. In my work with patients, a lot of the time, it's going through an unnamed grief process with a patient. They're grieving the fact that they can't walk anymore. They're grieving the fact that they have to rely on others, and they're used to being self-reliant. And my job is just to sort of help them name that grief and give them permission to experience the grief. Physical illness changes us. And it is hard stuff. And we need to give each other grace in the way that we grieve the losses of mobility and independence. And sometimes our dignity is at stake. And we need people around us to affirm us and give us that kind of grace. In terms of physical illness, I've got kind of 3 responses. The first thing is that illness, injury, things that slow us down are really gifts to help us slow down. I'm not going to try and candy coat the difficulty that people face, but it does help us slow down, and it does help us to reevaluate what's important, what matters in our life. Are we living according to the things that matter in our life, or are we caught up in the rat race? I've visited with a ton of patients. You'd think that a chaplain would experience a lot of really big, meaningful conversations at the deathbed. That naturally happens, definitely. But you'd be shocked how many really wonderful, spiritual, rich moments I get on a weekly basis visiting with people that have come to the hospital for a knee replacement surgery. Because physical illness, even if it's a minor one, can put us into a reflective space. Even a really good flu bug can knock us down and we're laying out on the sofa watching television we don't care about and just feeling miserable, and we're reevaluating life itself. We're thinking, am I really getting it right here? Am I paying attention to the things that matter? And maybe there's some changes that need to be made. Physical illness can be a little bit of a gift in that way to help us into that reevaluation state. Another response is that physical illness, injury, immobility, they're a reminder to us that despite what we try and fool ourselves into thinking, we are not in control. I'm a control freak. I like things orderly. I like to go about my life in certain ways. But there are times where I have to be reminded that ultimately I don't get a say in certain things. And physical illness and injury and immobility, it brings those things to bear. We're not in control, even though we want to be. And I'm really glad that Dar mentioned the number of recovery groups that take place here on this campus every single week, because they say a prayer. Dozens of times a week, a prayer is said in this place that resonates with all of us. It's from a famous theologian, Reinhold Niebuhr. It's called the Serenity Prayer. God, grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change. I'm not in control. I'm not in control. And God, I need your grace. I need your help to accept the things I cannot change. I also need courage to change the things that I can control. And I need the wisdom to know the difference. A third thing that I notice about physical illness, and I want to really hit home with this one. We experience our world through the vehicle of our bodies. Our physical bodies walk. First we crawl, then we walk. Sometimes we run. We shake hands with one another. We hug one another. We smile at one another. These are all physical activities. But you are not your body. Often when I visit with a patient that's at the end of life, their family is gathered around, and I have to say a sentence, something like this: I'm sorry that I didn't get to meet your loved one, and I didn't get to know them. What can you tell me about them? And in those moments, do you know how many people start by saying, well, Dad is 6'4". He has black hair. It's a little gray, but he's got black hair, thick mustache, and he runs about 240. That's the obvious stuff, but that's not who Dad is. Dad was a carpenter. Dad loved to travel. Dad has a great sense of humor. And these are the things that make us who we are. It's not our physical body. It's a tricky thing to think about because our physical bodies are how we interact with the world. I think of professional athletes or models who actually use their physical bodies as tools of the trade. But even then, they are not their bodies. How many elite athletes out there will we never, ever hear about because they didn't achieve levels of greatness, not because they weren't physically able, because they didn't have the character or the work ethic to really achieve greatness. They're not just their bodies. And I think about the beautiful people of the world. Sometimes they have insecurities because they're treated as though the physical body that they inhabit is all their worth, and there's no intellectual thought process inside. They are not their bodies. They're so much more. And each of us here, whatever your physical place in life, whatever you're experiencing, you could be super healthy right now. You could be hurting. But you are not your body. Your bodies are gifts. They're gifts of God. And they matter. And the way we treat our bodies, it matters. But we are so much more. So much more. I'm going to leave you with a quote from a French Jesuit priest. About 100 years ago, he said this. His name is really hard to pronounce, so pardon me, I'm going to butcher this. Pierre Teilhard de Chardin. I think I got close. He had a couple of sentences that are really meaningful. I want you to chew on this a little bit. We are not human beings having a spiritual experience. We are spiritual beings having a human experience. I'm going to paraphrase that now to fit what we're talking about. We are not physical bodies having a spiritual experience. We're spiritual beings having a physical experience. This is a gift of God, and it's a grace. I'm going to invite the music team to come back up. And I'd like to close with kind of a guided prayer. And so I'd invite you to get yourselves seated in a comfortable position. And if you're comfortable with this, just close your eyes and quiet your hearts and just be present to yourself. Be present to the things that God's talking to you about even now. I'm going to give you a moment to think and do a little breathing. And as you're breathing, I want you to think for a moment about gratitude and its role in your life. You don't have to make a long list right now, but just think of something that you're deeply grateful for this morning. Acknowledge that as a gift of God. Now, think about your life, even the next few days of your life. You've got some things to do, some places to be. Think about your agenda over the next couple of days. And I want you to use a little creativity and figure out a time that you can build a few minutes into your next few days to just sit and breathe. Schedule it if you have to. Put it on your mental calendar. Might be early morning for you. Might be right in the middle of the day when you're at your busiest, most anxious. Think about that. Plan it and do it. As you continue to breathe, think about the physical body that you inhabit. Your physical body has changed over the years. You grew up physically. You got mature physically. You did hard work with your body. Your body has experienced illness, injury, childbirth. Thank God for giving you a vehicle to experience the world through. Commit yourself in even a small way to honoring that gift. Now as we pray, We acknowledge, God, in this place, and we thank you, and we embrace these good gifts to us. And we thank you that through these good gifts, we have the ability to go be Jesus with our hands and our feet and our hearts. We ask your grace and strength to face our fears with faith, to examine those things that we have assumed in light of the facts, and attack our anxieties with action, and release our cares to you. Amen.